SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. In this series of intrapersonal character strengths, our next topic is resilience. Resilience means speedy recovery from problems, the ability to recover quickly from setbacks. Resilient or invulnerable, secure, stress resistant, these are the terms which we use for the people who bounce back immediately after adverse situations. It refers to a class of phenomena characterized by patterns of positive adaptation in the context of significant adversity and risk. Whenever we have risky situation or adverse situations, then our way to adapt those situations and positive adaptation is required, that is called resilience. So, good adaptation under adverse circumstances can be called resilience. Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats or other significant sources of stress. So, it means whenever we have certain stress sources, maybe adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, then our way of adapting those situations, that is called resilience. Resilience has been defined differently by different scholars. For example, resilience is the path a family or an individual follows as it adapts and prospers in the face of adversity or in the face of stress. Resilience is a capacity to cultivate strengths to positively meet the challenges of life. Next definition says ability to bounce back from adversity, capacity to rebound from adversity, strengthened and more resourceful we are. It means resilience is the ability to know where, how and when to use your energies to improve things for yourself and how to recruit help in that endeavors. So, if we combine all these definitions, we can say resilience has certain characteristics like better adaptation, we cultivate strengths, ability to bounce back from adversity and more resourceful we should be if we have high level on resilience and ability to recruit help. Recruiting help is also important at the time of adversity when we are not able to solve our problems. So, there are various factors affecting resilience. Some factors are in positive direction, others are in negative directions. So, these can be divided in broadly 3 sections. Number 1, risk factors, 2, assets and third one is protective factors. First, risk factors. A measurable characteristics in a group of individuals or their situations that predict negative outcomes in the future on a specific outcome criteria. For example, stressful events or various stresses or risk factors we have in our life. Here important point is they predict negative outcome in the future. Second is assets, which is positive outcome in the future. A measurable characteristics in a group of individuals or their situations that predicts positive outcomes in the future on a specific outcome criteria. Third important factors are under the category protective factors. A measurable characteristics in a group of individuals or their situation that predicts positive outcome in the context of risk or adversity. Here important point is at the time of risk or adversity only. Let us know more about protective and assets factors. I think this point is clear here that risk factors have negative outcome. On the other hand, assets and protective factors have positive outcomes. Then what is difference between protective factors and assets? Protective factors work only under adversity, like an airbag in a car works at the time of accident. On the other hand, assets always available with us. So, difference between protective factors and assets is, protective factors available at the time of risk only, at the time of high risk. On the other hand, assets always available with us. Resource or asset referring to the human, social, material capital utilized in adaptive processes. There are some other factors within us. If you could recall from character strengths chapter, we discussed about internal assets. So, internal assets or personal factors means certain factors which are protecting us or having higher level of resilience because of those factors, like mastery in motivation, competence, self-efficacy and many more factors which I will discuss in next slides. If we talk about these categories, then psychologists have identified number of factors in terms of risk factors, in terms of protective factors, in terms of assets. Let us start with risk factors, and these risk factors are child related factors. For example, if a child has low self-esteem, if a child has poor social skills, poor problem solving abilities, difficult temperament, lack of empathy, homelessness, early school dropout, these all factors are being identified as risk factors for resilience. On the other hand, if we talk about risk factors from the family or family risk factors, family violence, if there is violence in the family, that is risk factor for a child. Poor supervision, he is not able to get proper supervision in the family, again that is risk factor for the child. Harsh or inconsistent discipline in the family, for example, for same thing one day you are getting reward or no punishment, on the other hand you are getting harsh punishment. So, in such kind of situation, child is not able to understand what is expected from him or her. Next is lack of warmth or affection. There is no affection in the family if it is. Abuse or neglect is another risk factors. When we talk about school environment, then again there are various risk factors have been identified for a child, like school failure, bullying behavior in the school, if a child has peer rejection. Life events also very important stresses we can count, like divorce and family breakup is there, death of a family member, then they could be very strong or very severe level of risk factors for a child. Similarly, related to community and cultural factors, there are various identified risk factors are there, like neighborhood violence and crime, lack of support services, social or cultural discrimination, community norms concerning violence. So, if we are not able to get, or a child not able to get healthy and happy environment in his surrounding from the family, from the school or from the community and culture, which could be causes of low level of resilience. On the other hand, when we talk about protective factors, they have identified various protective factors in terms of biological factors, in terms of attachment as well as control. When we talk about biological factors like positive emotions, intelligence, creativity, resistance to disease, genetic and physical characteristics. So, all these are biological factors which protect us. On the other hand, attachment, attachment is very important phenomena which has been highlighted by various scholars, and it developed during developing stages. I will discuss about Erik Erikson theory and what is the role of attachment and other factors which may play very important role in our development. So, when we say attachment means capacity for bonding, for forming significant relationships with others, the capacity for empathy, compassion, care and joy. So, it means we have positive interpersonal relations with others if we have positive direction attachment. Third variable is control. Control means capacity to manipulate one's environment, environmental mastery should be there, social competence, social esteem, personal autonomy and sense of purpose, as well as a trait hardiness. This is very important trait in our personality which is counted as or stress proof factor. It is denoted by three qualities: commitment, control and challenge. And again I am repeating it, this hardiness is counted as stress proof personality. On the other hand, pessimism, stress prone personality. So, that is protective factor for a child as well as for an adult. There are some other child factors which have been identified in terms of protective factors like social competence, attachment to family, empathy, problem solving, optimism, school achievement, easy temperament, good coping style. So, these are the factors which have been counted as protective factor for a child when we are talking about resilience. At school level, again they have identified various protective factors like positive school climate, pro-social peer group, sense of belonging, opportunities for success at school and recognition of achievement, school norms regarding violence. So, broadly we can say positive environment which is protecting a child. Similarly, life events which may be again protective factors, meeting significant persons, moving to new area, opportunities at critical turning points or major life transitions. So, these are protective factors in terms of life events. Similarly, community and cultural factors are there which play as protective factors. They have identified some of them: access to support services, community networking, attachment to the community, participation in community group, community cultural norms against violence, strong cultural identity and ethnic pride. These are important protective factors. So, again same point as I discussed in terms of risk factors, here your community, your school, your family all have some good factors which are protecting you, and that is why you may have higher level of resilience. Similarly, they have identified some personality factors or internal assets, and we can say positive personality traits which are positively correlated with resilience. It is rare for individuals never to be confronted with adversity or challenging circumstances during the course of their life. People who are resilient tend to be able to harness their inner strengths and resources to rebound quickly and more effectively from setbacks. So, whenever they have those kind of adversity or challenging circumstances, they have certain strengths or resources so that they can immediately bounce back. What those factors are? Psychologists have identified some factors like positive self-regard. If you have positive self-regard, then that is supporting a higher level of resilience. Internal locus of evaluation is there. If you know good stress management strategies, existential concepts of freedom and responsibility is also important factor. Psychologists have also identified some factors as resilient children factors. These factors are positive peer and adult interactions, low degree of defensiveness and aggressiveness, and high degree of cooperation, participation and emotional stability, positive sense of self, sense of personal power rather than powerlessness, internal locus of control, belief that one is capable of exercising control, impact over the environment. So, these are the factors which are internal asset we can say, or positive personality traits which are highly correlated with resilience. There are some studies also talking about resilient children's characteristics. For example, William and his associates in 2001 reported the key protective factors emerged in resilient children. They have identified determination and persistence is very important, and it is positively correlated with resilience. They also observed an optimistic orientation to problem solving, ability to find purpose in life and caring for oneself. These are the factors which they have identified in resilient children. Children who develop competence despite adversity and difficult conditions while growing up appear to share the following qualities. These qualities are a sense of self-esteem and self-efficacy. I think now you know in detail what is self-esteem and what is self-efficacy as I discussed in the last class. An action oriented approach to obstacle or challenges, so they are more action oriented. Flexible problem solving and stress management strategies. It means they know stress management strategies, they are flexible in problem solving, they have action oriented approach as well as they have high level of self esteem and self efficacy. Some other scholars identified 6 primary factors that may protect against and help in the recovery from extreme or traumatic stress. these factors they identified as active facing fear and trying to solve problems, regular physical exercise, optimism, following moral compass, promoting social support, nurturing friendships and seeking role models, and being open minded and flexible in the way one think about problems or avoiding rigid and dogmatic thinking. So, these are the identified factors for resilience by this study. People who are resilient demonstrate following internal personal factors. So, when I am saying internal personal factors, it means they are more personality factors or internal assets or the factors which we have with us. These factors are sociability, form healthy relationship, optimism, view self and future positivity, flexibility, change is part of life and they accept it, self confidence, move towards goals, base decisions on confidence in one's ability, competence, be good at something and take pride in it. Some other factors are like insightfulness, understand people and situation, be able to see other sides, perseverance, don't give up, and perspective, view crisis as challenges to be faced, not impossible obstacles. They also have high level of self control. It means manage strong feelings and impulses, internalize of locus of control. I think you can easily identify some of these factors are common in different studies and they have identified some additional factors also. It is good to know various studies so that we can know how some of these factors have been highlighted again and some other factors have been included by some new studies, and this is the total number of internal character strengths or internal assets or positive personality traits which are highly correlated with resilience or they contribute to higher level of resilience. Similarly, scholars have identified some family factors and family as a unit and how it could be resilient. So, when we talk about family factors, they have identified that family factors which support to a person's resilience as well as family members' resilience, these factors are important like supportive, caring parents, family harmony, secure and stable family, supportive relationship with an adult, strong family norms and morality. They have also identified some characteristics of resilient families. For example, share clear consistent messages. So, the family which are resilient, they have clear consistent messages sharing with each other, openly express their emotions. They openly express their emotion and share their emotions with each other. Solving problems together. Whenever they confront certain problems, they solve those problems together. And similarly, they have identified certain traits of resilient families. These traits are commitment, sharing time together or spending time together. They respect each other. Higher level of spirituality, connectedness at higher level they have higher level of adaptability, communication and cohesion. So, now I think you know number of internal factors, number of external factors, and these factors are in terms of vulnerability as risk factors, as protective factors as well as assets. So, if we just recall from previous say 6-7 slides, I shared number of factors in terms of risk factors, in terms of protective factors and risk factors at personal level, at family level, at school level, at community level. And these are various factors which are actually mediating, moderating when we are talking about resilience. So, if we just count these factors, we can say there were some individual factors and some of them were risk factors, others were protective factors or help us to adapt, and sometimes maladapting factors they could be counted. On the other hand, I discussed about number of environmental factors in terms of from family, in terms of from school, in terms of from the community as well as from other surrounding sources, and these again can be divided broadly in two categories in terms of risk factors as well as protective factors. After knowing all those factors in terms of risk factors, protective factors, assets, let us understand what is the model of resilience. I think broadly we can divide these factors into two categories. One, individual factors, which could be positive as well as negative factors, or factors which help us to adapt or which are cause of maladaptation. On the other hand, there could be various other factors in terms of environmental factors. When I am saying environmental factors, factors from family environment, from school environment, from surrounding environment, from community environment. And these factors may be facilitators in terms of protective factors or assets, or sometimes these factors could be risk factors. So, all these factors actually mediating and moderating whenever we met adversity and have response. So, for understanding resilience, we should understand all those factors which are in between playing significant role, and this is the message from this particular model. Our next model is talking about resilience cycle. We have normal conditions most of the time, but sometime all of a sudden we have adversity strikes or risk factors or trauma or something which is bad in our life, or maybe stresses in our life. Whenever we meet stresses or adverse situation or traumatic situation, then all of a sudden we have deteriorating phase and dysfunctioning level we have. So, at one point all of us may have lower level of well-being because of this dysfunctional level. Then after that we start to improve. First adapting phase, second recovery phase, and then growing phase. So, first we try to survive, then stability level we have, and then growth resilience level we have. Here this progress is, or this speed is differ person to person, and here is our interest, and this speed is affected by risk factors, protective factors, as well as by assets, and that is why we take interest in all those factors. I think message from this model is quite clear to you. Once again I am repeating, adversity strikes or we have traumatic situation, immediately deteriorating phase we had, and after that we started to survive, adapting, recovery and growing. And here we have role of risk factors, protective factors and assets which are facilitating or sometime hampering our resiliency or resilience progress. After knowing resilience, factors affecting resilience as well as model describing resilience, let us know role of developing periods and stages for resilience as well as for other intrapersonal character strengths. In this context, psychoanalysis or psychodynamics perspective is very important. Importance of childhood experiences and developmental stages they have highlighted. When we are talking about these childhood experiences or developmental stages, these can be applied for understanding positive self, optimism, hope, resilience and many other factors. Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development theory is very important to understand it. He has used number of terms. So, first of all let us know what these terms are. He said we have crisis at each stage. Crisis means an important turning point. Whenever we have these crises at different stages, then we have two resolutions, positive resolution or negative resolution. A possible positive resolution to strengthen the ego and therefore to great adaptation. On the other hand, if we have negative resolution, to weaken the ego and inhibits adaptation. Again I am repeating, first point is at each stage we have crisis and we solve these crises in terms of positive resolution or negative resolution. If we had positive resolution to strengthen the ego and therefore to greater adaptation we would be having in our life. On the other hand, if we had negative resolution, it will weaken the ego and inhibits adaptation. If we had positive resolution, then we add one virtue in our personality. When the crisis characterizing a stage is positively resolved, a virtue emerged in one's personality. So, again I am repeating all those points because these points are very important. Without understanding these points, you would not be able to know how different stages playing role to have personality development. He used term crisis, an important turning point, and this important turning point or this crisis would be resolved in two form, positive or negative. If it's positive, then we add one virtue in our personality. On the other hand, if it's negative, then weaken the ego and inhibits adaptation. He said each stage can be divided in three categories: immature phase, critical phase and resolution phase. Immature phase, when we are just entering in this stage. Critical phase, when we are resolving it in positive sense or in negative one. And third one is the resolution, when you have clear cut message whether it's resolved positively or negatively. He has mentioned that these stages, psychosocial stages which he has explained, determined by heredity and environmental factors. Caregiving during the first year of a child's life is the most powerful predictor of resiliency in children. That is why to know all these stages are very important, because they play very important role in development of resilience. It has been observed that constant feedback from a few adults early in life, not necessarily the parents are important. So, there should be some supportive adults who are giving positive feedback and constant feedback to a child. When we talk about each and every stage and how these stages are important for us, then we should understand psychosocial crisis stages, life stage, which relationship is important at this stage and what kind of issues they have, and then finally if this crisis is resolved positively, then which virtue we would add in our personality. Let us start one by one. First crisis is trust versus mistrust. This is at the age of infant, first stage, and here mother is significant figure. At this stage, child learns feeding and being comfortable, teething, sleeping. And during this period, if he observed trustworthy world or trustworthy relation, then only he would be having hope and drive in his life. So, you just see, as per this theory, that is the first virtue of your life which you developed if you got trustworthy environment. Second one is autonomy versus shame or doubt. That is next stage, toddler, and parents here a significant relationship. During this period, a child learn bodily functions, toilet training, muscular control, walking, etc. So, during this period, whether the child is getting autonomy or shame or doubtful environment, if this crisis resolved positively, then he would add willpower and self control in his personality. Third one is initiative versus guilt. This is the stage of preschool, and here family play important role. Exploration and discovery, adventure and play are important issues or important roles at this stage. So, if he is able to take initiatively things, then purpose and direction would be developed in his personality, or virtue, that is purpose and direction, he would add in his personality. On the other hand, if it is not resolved positively, then he might have guilt in his life. Next crisis is industry versus inferiority. School child, here more relations are important, like school teachers, friends, neighborhood, etc. And issues here are achievement and accomplishment. So, if he has industrious kind of environment, then he may add virtue like competence and method in his personality. On the other hand, if he couldn't resolve it, then he may lose a competence and method from his personality. Similarly, next stage is identity versus role confusion. So, here life stage is adolescence and important relations, peers, groups, influences, etc. Issues at this stage are resolving identity and direction, becoming a grown up. So, at this stage, if you know what are your clear cut roles, or do you have role confusion? If you have clear cut identity, then it means you have a positive resolution here, and fidelity or trustworthiness and devotion will be added in your personality. On the other hand, if you can't resolve this stage positively, then you might lose trustworthiness or devotion. Next stage is intimacy versus isolation. Young adult, lovers, friends, work connections are important relations at this stage. Intimate relationships, work and social life are important issues at this stage, and a child learn love and affiliation. Next one is generativity and stagnation, and mid adult age is there. Children, community, all these interacting modes are there. Giving back, helping, contribution. So, this is the stage where you give back and helping, contributing. So, if you have positive resolution at this stage, then you add care and protection. Next stage is integrity versus despair, that is late adult stage. Here society, the world, life, these are important relationships, and meaning and purpose, life achievements are issues at this stage. If you have resolved most of these stages positively in your life, then only you have wisdom. So, you just see one by one we are adding one virtue in our personality, and last one is the wisdom. If we had number of positive resolutions as well as added virtues in our personality, then only we would be getting wisdom as a virtue in our personality. I think you have understood how these all stages are very important, and on different stages we have different relations, different issues, and we resolve those issues. If we resolve them positively, then only we add certain virtues in our personality. In this series, our next topic is measures to assess resilience. When we are talking about its assessment, there are two ways. Some scholars have focused only on personality traits or personal characteristics which are correlated with or part of resilience. On the other hand, other scholars have focused on some surrounded factors also. I have selected two examples, one based on the internal factors and another one when they have counted personal factors as well as environmental factors. And I have taken example of Kenner-Davidson resilience scale here. It is focusing only on the personal factors. They have identified 25 items which are supported by 5 factors, and they have identified these 5 factors as: the first factor includes personal competence, high standards and tenacity, endorsing one's strong sense of power and adherence to one's goal when facing setback situations. It means we can count these are the factors or these are the variables or these are the basic units to define resilience as per this theory. Second identified factor is trust in one's instincts, tolerance of negative affect, strengthening effects of stress. This factor focusing on one's calmness, decision and promptness when coping with stress. So, in this second factor, these were the key phrases for the items which they had in their psychological test, and this factor made a particular chunk called second factor. Third one is comprises positive acceptance of change and secure relationship with others. The factor is mainly related to one's adaptability. So, third factor they have mentioned that it is related to adaptability, which includes acceptance of change and secure relations with others. So, related to these factors they had certain items or questions which they ask a person. Fourth factor, name as control, implies control of achieving one's own goal and the ability to access assistance from others or when you ask for social support. Last factor in his theory or in the psychological test was spiritual influences, assessed one's faith in God or in fate. They have identified these 5 factors with 25 items. But after publishing this work, various scholars revalidated their scale in different cultures. We also validated it in Indian setting, and we found 4 factors with these 25 items. These 25 items or questions which they have included in this psychological test, they were quite reliable and valid in Indian setting also, but they define better 4 factor solution. Factor 1, correspondence more clearly to features of hardiness, toughness. Factor 2 contains elements of optimism, view of a benevolent world, as well as adaptability, mental toughness, active coping and cognitive focus and control they had. Third factor consists items related to resourcefulness, trust, purpose, self-efficacy and able to adapt the change. Fourth factor was goal directedness, achievement and purpose. So, this way this scale was defined in Indian setting. As you know, culture counts. So that's why in different cultures, when we revalidate a psychological test, we can have different factor solution. On the other hand, we supported that this scale is quite reliable and valid in Indian setting. Another example is where they are taking into account individual factors, caregiver factors, as well as context like school related items, family related items, community related items, and then they defined resilience model. Again I am repeating, some psychologists, they are just asking questions related to individuals' characteristics, and on the basis of these characteristics they are defining what level of resilience they have. On the other hand, in other models, they are taking into account individual factors, caregiver factors, context related factors, and then they are assessing resilience level. So, in this model which I have selected from Linda and her associates, she has mentioned that there are three important factors, or can say super factors related to individual, caregiver and context. And then there are sub factors under each category: personal skills, peer support, social skills related to individual, then related to caregiver, physical caregiving, and context, spiritual, educational, cultural contexts are important, and then in such kind of psychological test there should be items related to all these domains, and on the basis of all those items one can understand level of someone's resilience. So, I think that should be clear, as I mentioned in previous classes also, what is the model, on which model based we have psychological test and what does it mean. So, here if we compare these two models, first model says there are some items or questions which are related to personal qualities, personal character strengths or personal traits we can say. On the basis of that we are studying someone's resilience level. On the other hand, in second model, we are taking into account individual level, caregiver level, context level questions, and here our model is totally different. So, that is why one person can get different responses or different level in different psychological tests as per these theoretical models or as per these explained models in different psychological tests. Next topic in this series is problem focused coping increases resilience. It has been observed that people who focus on solving their problems are the most resilient and are sick less often, while emotion focused coping impairs resilience. They have observed that problem solvers, they are high at examining the situation to see what solutions may be possible. Consider various actions, select the best, take action, observe effects of the action, modify for best results. People bounce back from disasters, tragedy, trauma, stress by having care and support, high expectations for success, opportunities for meaning participation, positive bonding, clear and consistent boundaries they have, life skills they have. And it has been observed that even community wise, even family wise, we can say this particular community or this particular family has higher level of resilience. Like for community, community resilience is the collective capacity to respond to adversity and change. A resilient community can respond to crisis in ways that strengthen community bonds, resources and the community's capacity to cope. Positive Youth Development Program is there, and they have observed due to this program they have attained 9 outcomes, and these 9 outcomes are correlated with resilience. That is why we are adding them here. Positive healthy youth development is marked by the attainment of 9 outcomes. These 9 outcomes are correlated with resilience. That is why we are talking about these outcomes here. They observed that as per this positive youth development program, rewarding bonding was there, promoting social, emotional, cognitive, behavioral and moral competency was there, encouraging self-determination, fostering spirituality, nurturing a clear and positive identity, building beliefs in the future, recognizing positive behavior, providing opportunities for social development, establishing pro-social norms. So, these all factors are highly correlated with resilience. Similarly, there is another APA model, where they discussed about resilience health professionals, and they observed that personal characteristics, workplace characteristics, social network as positive or facilitating factors. On the other hand, some challenges they identified as the risk factors. So, they discussed about personal characteristics as humor, bounce back, adaptability, optimism, confidence, organization, flexibility, tolerance, sense of self-worth. These are highlighted or having positive or can say protective factors. Similarly, workplace characteristics, strong management support, team culture, a secure base, buffering capacity, time for reflection. In terms of social network, family social support, leisure time, interests out with work, these are the factors which are having positive impact on resilient health professionals. On the other hand, they also observed some challenges. Challenges were workload, time pressure, lack of communication, information overload, challenging patients, rural environment. So, it means there are various factors which may be situation specific as they have identified in this sense. The APA suggested the following factors are generally important for the cultivating of resilience. So, whenever we are talking about interventional programs, we are talking about policies, then we should take into account these factors. Make connections with family, friends and communities. That kind of supporting environment should be provided. Avoid seeing crisis in insolvable problems. Accept that change is part of living. Move towards your goals. Take decision action, use problem and task focusing coping. Look for opportunities for self discovery. Nurture positive view of yourself. Keep events in perspective. Maintain a hopeful outlook. Take care of yourself. Attend to your needs and feelings. So, these are the factors which are facilitating or cultivating resilience in human behavior. I will recommend to watch this talk by Dr. Bonival, who is talking about happiness and resilience in school setting. She has promoting intervention programs to increase happiness and resilience in school setting, and you would enjoy this video. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome. So I would like to start this talk by posing a very simple question, which is originally posed by Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology. In 2 words or less, what would you most want for your children? Think about it and try to answer. Think as educators, think as teachers, think as parents. What would you want? I think probably the answer would be very simple. The majority of you would say happiness. I would like my children to be happy. Perhaps somebody would say well-being, perhaps somebody would say achievement, but I think happiness would probably win. And the next question, what do the schools actually teach? And they don't teach happiness, not really. They teach achievement, yes. They teach thinking skills, yes. They teach conformity, yes. They teach maths, English, everything, but not well-being, but not resilience, but not happiness. So there is actually something to do. There is something to do in preparing our kids for life. If you imagine the future for your kids, what is this future going to look like? This future, do you think they're going to have a job for life? Chances are not. Do you think they're going to stay in the same place? Probably not. Do you think they're going to have periods of unemployment? Probably yes. Do you think they're going to be absolutely confused at some point in this crazy, mad world they're actually facing? Probably chances are yes. So how are we as a system, as a society, as academics, as parents, how are we really preparing our kids for life? What skills can we actually teach them? So I propose that actually what is fundamental is to teach these kids the skills of happiness, the skills of well-being and the skills of resilience. Also because they're facing very difficult periods of their life of depression. At any point in time, 2% of kids aged 11 to 15 and up to 11% of young people aged 16 to 24 are suffering from depression. And depression is on the rise. Depression is starting much earlier. Depression and anxiety disorders are becoming more and more prominent in our societies. And we know, of course, the result of depression is academic difficulties, drug difficulties, difficulties with smoking, with drinking, and so on. The whole host of very complicated difficulties. So, what do we do? Why teach happiness and well-being? Apart from talking about the negatives, apart from talking about problems and the problems our kids are going to face, there are actually some positives about happiness and well-being. And some positives include, for example, creativity. People who are happier are much more creative. They actually produce more. They're able to experiment with new information. They're able to think about new information. They're able to persist at tasks. They're actually able to concentrate better. They're able to achieve more and to have higher academic success. These people are also more optimistic. And why is optimism important? Optimism actually leads to resilience. I'll tell you a story. It's a personal story. It's a personal story about a couple of my kids. So once upon a time, about 3 years ago, I decided to take 2 of my kids to India. Well, we got on a plane. We booked the whole trip in India, a very sophisticated trip, about 4 different places to travel around. And we got in, we took off, and then the air hostess brings around those landing cards. So I start filling them in. And it's written there, visa number. What visa number? Do you know that to go to India with a British passport, you need a visa? Not many of you do. I didn't. I didn't get the visa. I didn't think about the visa. I just booked the trip for 2 weeks. A very, very good, sophisticated program, but no visa. So, how does it link to optimism and resilience? Well, I stopped crying in Heathrow. My 10-year-old at that point, who is very high in emotional intelligence, spent the whole flight there and back, cuddling me and saying, "Mom, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's all right. We're going to get through." And my oldest son, 12 at that point, who's very, very, very high on optimism, well, it took him about 20 minutes to turn around and say, "Mom, you know what? I think it's not the end of the world at all. I'm actually enjoying this trip very much. I have this feeling that I'm going to be able to play my Game Boy as much as I want, and you're not going to tell me off." So I can guarantee to you, optimism does result in resilience. I have the first-hand proof of it. Well, there are some other benefits. In fact, well-being does lead to longevity. There is a very famous study of positive psychology actually demonstrating that nuns who were much happier lived about 9 years longer than nuns in the same convent who were actually less happy. Optimism does well-being does lead to less vulnerability to illness. If you put happy people in a lab and expose them to cold, they're actually much less likely to catch it, as demonstrated by the weight of the tissues as a result. Happy people are much more sociable, they're more trusting, they're more helpful, they're actually less hostile, and they're overall better people, so not necessarily self-centered. So hopefully I actually demonstrated to you that teaching well-being and happiness does make some sense. So how can we teach happiness? Where should we teach happiness? I propose, first of all, at school and of course at home. But what are those skills that we need to teach? First of all, we need to teach what happiness is not. And what happiness is not is, first of all, it's not pleasure. Pleasure is nice. Pleasure is very pleasant. I like massage as well. But massage actually doesn't buy you long-term happiness, unfortunately. Massage doesn't protect you from lots of important events in life. What is happiness is not as well? It's actually not beauty. We strive for beauty. Look at all the magazines, look at all the media, look everywhere. We all strive for beauty. Yet, more beautiful people are actually not happier, in fact, than the rest of us. Happiness is not money. Happiness is not about money. Because, very simply, people who are much richer are only a little bit, tiny little bit happier than the rest of us. So money doesn't buy happiness either, and happiness is not power. In fact, all of this contribute to the phenomenon very well known as affluenza. So this is precisely what is not happiness. What should we teach? Well, one of the skills to teach is how to cope with the so-called tyranny of choice. We all know that choice is good, right? We are all in a system where we are exposed to choices. And yes, some choice is good, but not too much choice. The problem is when we're exposed to too much choice, when we have 220 pairs of trainers in front of us, and we don't know which ones to buy, this choice is actually not helpful, because when we're exposed to too much choice, it actually has the opposite effect. We shut down. We are not able to choose. And the more we try to choose, the more we try to actually maximize, the so-called phenomenon of maximization, the less happy we actually become. So one skill to teach is how to choose, and which situations to choose, and which situations we can actually refuse from making a choice. Another skill to teach is about the danger of comparison. Very simply, if you want to be unhappy, try to choose somebody who is doing better than you and keep comparing. It's the best way. Really works. And if you want to be happy, either A, try not to compare, or B, try to compare with somebody who is doing worse. So one or another. The problem is, the better we do in life, the more we still continue comparing upwards. And this is the killer for well-being. And it's a very important skill to teach. Third point, the hazard of habituation. 20 years ago, kids used to turn up to school with an apple. Okay? Nowadays, nothing really changed. They still turn up with an apple. Just the price has changed a little bit. So, another little problem with the apple is that they keep updating all the time. So a year later, they want the next one, and of different color. The problem, again, is that we get used to things, especially to material things, very, very fast. The usual adaptation period is 3 months. Really, for material things, is actually much faster. So it doesn't matter what you buy, you still get used to it. And your kids get used to it, and probably even faster than you. So you can buy an iPod, an iPad, a next computer, next generation of anything else, and next mobile phone. They still get used to it. And 1 month, 2 months, 3 months later, they still want the next thing that just came out. So keep doing it if you wish, but that's not going to help them, and it's not probably going to help you either, in terms of your pocket money, whatever is left from it. Another point, very important, the negativity bias. What is negativity bias? Is that actually our brain is functioning in such a way that we pick up negative information much better and much quicker than all the positive information out there. And what does it mean? It means that actually if somebody told you are good, and if somebody just gave you a criticism, you walk out remembering the criticism. Have you ever had performance review when your boss told you 5, 10 things you are brilliant at, and just mention one little thing that's not working so well, and you walk out thinking of what? Well, your kids think of exactly the same, because the negative information is much more powerful than the positive information. And to counteract this, we need to work on increasing positive emotions. And what we know from science is that in order to counteract the negative effect of negative emotions, we need 3 times as many positive emotions in our life to actually counterbalance. So working on increasing this positive emotion is again an essential skill. So the next step is really fundamentally changing the way you look in the world and your kids look at the world. Is the glass half full or is it half empty? And again, there are things to learn, there are things to do. So for example, we have the NUM process that we teach to many children in many different schools across the country. It's a very simple process, how to deal with negative emotions. We get the kids to wear an elastic band, and every time they feel a negative emotion, they click it. Okay, very, very simple. When we first introduced it to teachers though, the teachers turned around and said, do you really think I'm going to give my 30 boys elastic bands? Do you know what's going to happen? Actually, this didn't happen. What did happen? The kids did wear the elastic bands, and so did their parents. And they clicked them every time they experienced a negative emotion. Going to step number 2, the U bit, is understand. So once you notice the negative emotion, try to understand why is it there, where is it coming from, and what is going to happen if it's not stopped. What are going to be the spiral effects of this negative emotion? Step number 3 is manage. How do we manage negative emotions? Some of this we know spontaneously, some of this we actually need the science to tell us. So the best way to manage the negative emotions is to remember the acronym ACT, which is active, calming or thinking interventions. Active interventions, the best one is exercise. If you have a chance to go for a run around the block when you are stressed out, that's the quickest and the best solution, completely scientifically proven. If you have a chance to calm down and meditate for 2 minutes, we know, for example, that schools that have done meditation trials with all of their kids are showing remarkable results. Again, this is one of the best ways to calm down negative emotions. And if you have a chance just to think, okay, taking everything into account, what good is in this situation, again, that would help as well. And then step number 4 is build on the positive emotions. So, moving on, how do we develop resilience in kids? So, we developed a program on resilience, teaching children to identify cognitive processes that go on in their own mind when they're exposed to different situations. Because what we do know from science is that if we notice the cognitive explanations of negative events, that when these events take place, we can actually affect the emotional outcomes of these events. To put it very simply, we introduce kids to something called parrots of perceptions, or little imaginary creatures sitting on their shoulder telling them what to think. And we all have these parrots. These are explanatory styles represented as metaphorical figures. Well, some of us have the blamer parrot. Whatever happens, it's all your fault. Some of us have the judge parrot. Whatever happens, it's not fair. It's not fair. The system is all against me. It's absolutely not right. Some of us have the warrior parrot. Oh my God, what's going to happen in the future? Everything is going to collapse. Some of us have the faulty parrot. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I didn't prepare well enough. It's all my fault. Some of us have the loser. My God, I'm useless. I'm just useless. I want to disappear somewhere, you know? And some of us, especially teenagers, have the whatever parrot. Does it look like I care? Okay, you recognize this one, don't you? I have it every day from 4. Okay, once you recognize the parrot, then the next step is to consider, is the parrot right or wrong? We actually put the parrots on trial and look for alternatives and evidence. And usually it turns out that the parrot is not completely right. It may be a little bit right, but usually a little bit wrong. If somebody has just failed an exam, yes, perhaps the teacher is against them and really selected all the wrong questions, but there is a good chance that they actually didn't prepare well enough either. So it's about thinking and learning to think in such a way that you actually balance the evidence and alternatives and you actually come out with an accurate perception of reality. So think about your own personal aviary after this talk. Well, another step is to develop resilience muscles. Resilience is developed when we have family, friends, and close people around us to help us in difficult situations. Resilience is developed when we know what our strengths are, what we are really, really good at. Resilience is developed when we have the high level of self-efficacy or have some evidence from the past that we were able to overcome difficult events in our past previously. And resilience is developed when we have positive emotions in our life. And research does show that, in fact, when you teach children these skills, their resilience does go up and actually continues staying up a year later. And research does show that when you teach these skills, their depression levels do go down, and even if they do come back up later on, they're actually still lower than in a control group, because what is happening during teenagehood, that actually, unfortunately, depression keeps rising year by year. So, as already mentioned before, I am a psychologist. And I do know all of these things from science, but not only from science. These are my life qualifications, minus the monkey. Between me and my husband, we have 4 teenagers and 1 baby. Teenagers aged 13, 14, 15, and 16. So I do live this every day. Of course, every day, or nearly every day, I have an ill baby or a child. Every day, I have somebody forgetting something. Every day, I have either cigarettes in the bag or bad note from school, bad mark from school, of course. And this is the actual life. So can you build resilience and well-being during these circumstances? Yes, you can. It takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of patience, but it is possible. And just to finish, one of my current projects, I'm working with the government of Bhutan to develop guidelines for UN on how to develop happiness-based public policy. And there is a lot of really good work going on this project. And I would like to finish with the quote from this project on positive education. We see education for well-being as contributing to a solution of achieving the new economic paradigm, especially if it is guided by the values of altruism, compassion, respect, responsibility, indigenous values, and becoming a complete human being. In fact, we believe that education that shows concern for others enlarges the person rather than diminishes their uniqueness. Becoming a good human being is about learning to take greater pleasure in contributing to the flourishing of others than your own. Thank you very much.